a money laundering organization based with Chinese nationals. This partnership has laundered criminal proceeds in excess of $50 million. The charges we announce here involve 24 defendants. These defendants include members and associates of the Sinaloa drug cartel, and these defendants also include members of a Chinese money laundering organization. These two groups have worked together to launder millions and millions of dollars in drug proceeds resulting from the sale of dangerous drugs in this country, including drugs such as fentanyl and methamphetamine. These two groups have discovered that they have mutual interests. The cartels are desperate to get cash made from the sale of drugs in the United States back down to Mexico without having that cash seized by US or Mexican authorities. The Chinese money laundering groups, on the other hand, are in the business of helping wealthy Chinese nationals obtain cash in this country and thereby circumvent export controls in China on the movement of cash. Together, these groups have created an organization in which millions and millions of dollars are moved in proceeds from the drug sales in the United States back down to Mexico. And wealthy Chinese nationals in this country are given access to virtually limitless supplies of cash. I want to explain the indictment in further detail, but before I do, I want to introduce some of the people here on stage with me. First, we have Administrator Ann Milgram. She's the head national of the DEA, or Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA was the lead agency in this case. We also have Tyler Hatcher, the special agent in charge of IRS criminal investigation, which did the financial analysis in this case. And we have Assistant Chief Deputy Kevin Williams of the United States Marshal Service, which assisted with the capture of fugitives. Also, we have our local partners represented here. We cannot do these cases without our local partners. Here on stage with me are Chief Darren Arakawa of Southgate Police Department, Chief Jake Fisher of the El Monte Police Department, Chief Scott Lawner of the Downey Police Department, Lieutenant Michael Henderson of the Glendora Police Department, and Captain Pedro Gara of the Fullerton Police Department. You'll be hearing remarks first from Administrator Ann Milgram. Then I will discuss the indictment in further details, and then you'll hear remarks from Chief Darren Arakawa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, United States Attorney Estrada. Good morning. DEA's top operational priority is to defeat the cartels that are flooding the United States with deadly drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. The Sinaloa cartel is a ruthless, violent, global criminal enterprise that is responsible for killing Americans and devastating communities from coast to coast. They do this for one reason: money. Drug trafficking generates billions of dollars for the Sinaloa cartel each year. For the cartel's leaders to spend it, the money has to be cleaned. For years, the Sinaloa cartel relied on smuggling truckloads of cash to Mexico or using middlemen to launder that money through banks and businesses. This investigation shows that the Sinaloa cartel has entered into a new criminal partnership with Chinese nationals living in the United States who launder money for the cartels. Today's announcement centers on the indictment of 24 individuals who laundered drug money for the Sinaloa cartel, the profits of their poison. This indictment charges a vast network of the Sinaloa cartel's money launderers, the brokers in the United States who negotiated contracts with members of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, the drug traffickers who paid hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the cartel for methamphetamine and cocaine, the couriers who collected, counted, and packaged the drug money and delivered it to the Chinese nationals who are laundering money in the United States, the money launderers in Los Angeles who laundered that money back to the cartels in a number of different ways: by selling those drug dollars to Chinese nationals here in the US, by purchasing gold and jewels here to sell at a profit in Mexico, and by buying cryptocurrency. These Chinese criminal money laundering networks can move money faster, cheaper, and at a fraction of what is usually charged. Chinese money laundering networks charge as little as 1 or 2% commission to launder drug money, as compared to the 5 or 10% charged by traditional money launderers. These Chinese money laundering networks need cash in the United States because the network's wealthy Chinese customers in China are prohibited from transferring more than approximately $50,000 out of China each year. One of the defendants in this case, Edgar Martinez Reyes, managed a group of money launderers in the greater Los Angeles area and partnered with PG Tong, a Chinese national and leader of the criminal money laundering network. These two defendants traveled together to meet with Sinaloa cartel members in Mexico to negotiate contracts to launder drug money in the United States. Martinez Reyes couriers in Los Angeles picked up hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time. Tens, 20s, 50s, and hundreds wrapped in rubber bands from drug traffickers supplied by the Sinaloa cartel. These couriers would take that money, count it, package it, and deposit it in bank accounts set up in their own names and in others' names, depositing small amounts over and over again to avoid the bank's reporting requirements. One of their couriers made 24 back-to-back deposits at a Citibank ATM totaling $16,000. And another courier deposited another nearly $20,000 in drug money in 15 back-to-back deposits at another Citibank ATM a few days later. Martinez Reyes and his associates would also deliver the drug money to the Chinese criminal money laundering network run by another defendant, Sei Zhang, where he would resell those dollars to wealthy Chinese customers who would then buy vehicles, homes, and luxury goods in the United States. Today's indictment strikes at the very heart of the Sinaloa cartel, its very purpose, to make money off the death and destruction that they cause. It shows how the cartel relies on a network of Chinese money launderers to profit from selling drugs across the United States. I want to thank the People's Republic of China, which informed us that they detained one of the fugitives from this case in May. We have had multiple law enforcement engagements with the Ministry of Public Security in China since the Woodside Summit between Presidents Biden and Xi last November. I also would like to thank the government of Mexico, which has reported that it arrested one of the other fugitives last week. I want to thank the men and women of DEA's Los Angeles Field Division and task force officers from the Glendora, Southgate, Downey, El Monte, and Fullerton police departments. I'd also like to thank the Internal Revenue Service and, of course, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Central District of California, which is a tremendous partner in this work. All of these men and women worked tirelessly on this investigation. Today's charges are yet another step in DEA's efforts to target the cartels responsible for the deadliest drug threat that our country has ever faced. Our work is not done. There is more to come. Thank you.
Now I will discuss the indictment in greater detail. Good morning again. The indictment that we announced today charges Mexican drug cartels and Chinese money laundering groups with partnering together to perpetuate a cycle of destruction in this country. They perpetuate this cycle by importing more and more dangerous drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine into this country and then laundering those proceeds using the Chinese money laundering groups. As I often say, synthetic drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl are causing devastation across our country. As you know, fentanyl kills quickly, methamphetamine kills more slowly, but the results are the same. We see these results in our cities and towns across the country. Young people are taking what they thought was a pharmaceutical pill and not waking up the next morning because that drug was laced with fentanyl. We see on our streets methamphetamine getting cheaper and cheaper and flooding the streets, leaving people in a cycle of addiction. Many of those people end up living on our streets. This is not happening by accident. Organized criminal groups are profiting from this destruction, and this indictment reveals how. The Sinaloa cartel is one of the largest criminal organizations in the world. It transports massive amounts of drugs into our country and is, in fact, the lead importer into our country of fentanyl. It is also highly violent. The number of murders in Mexico attributed to the cartels is staggering. Even law enforcement and politicians are often targeted for assassination. The cartels have also reduced their need for crops or land. Using precursor chemicals imported from Asia, they're able to set up labs in Mexico which manufacture these synthetic drugs and thereby after transporting these drugs into the United States through hubs such as Los Angeles, they move these drugs throughout our country and also internationally to other countries. With drug trafficking, it's all about the money. So the most critical part of the drug trade is getting that cash, that money made from drug sales, back down to the cartels in Mexico. This is where the Chinese money laundering groups come in. Chinese nationals are generally prohibited from taking out of their country more than $50,000 a year. But many wealthy Chinese nationals want to have more money in this country so they can take advantage of opportunities in this country. The Chinese money laundering groups help those wealthy Chinese nationals obtain cash in this country for a fee so that they can take advantage of opportunities such as buying real estate, such as paying tuition, such as other investment operations. I will describe how this works based on a chart that is in the indictment. And I'll ask now to look at that chart. We could bring it forward, please. As you will see in the chart, we have here depicted wealthy Chinese nationals who are in the business of trying to obtain cash in the United States. At the behest of the Chinese money laundering groups or brokers, they will initiate a transaction from a Chinese bank to an account controlled by the Chinese brokers or money launderers. At that point, the Chinese money laundering group will release the funds, the cash, to the Chinese nationals, this money coming from the illegal sale of drugs in this country. Meanwhile, to pay the cartels back, the Chinese money laundering groups use that money that was sent to an account they control to purchase goods in China. Goods such as electronics, goods such as clothing, goods such as precursor chemicals. Those goods are then sent to Mexico. The goods, when they arrive in Mexico, are then sold, and the proceeds from those sales go back to the cartels in order to pay them for the drugs they shipped to the United States. We can move the chart back, please. Of note, as I mentioned, some of the goods that are sent from China to Mexico are precursor chemicals, chemicals that are used to make things like fentanyl and methamphetamine. And that's what I mean when I talk about a cycle of destruction. The drugs being sold here in the United States are then being used to fund precursor chemicals, which will be used to make even more drugs that are sent into our country. The Department of Justice will not sit by and allow this cycle of destruction to continue. And we attack this problem on multiple fronts. We seize hundreds of thousands of pounds of methamphetamine and fentanyl coming into our country from Mexico every year. We prosecute the individuals responsible for that. We also go after those who sell the drugs in this country, including those who try to hide behind the dark web. We also prosecute those drug dealers whose sales of drugs directly result in the death of another person. These cases are known as death resulting cases. In the last 3 years, my office has prosecuted almost 6 of those cases. Those cases are important because they carry 20-year mandatory minimum sentences and send a clear message of zero tolerance. But it is essential that we go after the money. And that's what we're doing in this case, prosecuting those who launder the drug proceeds. This is not the first such case we've done. It will not be the last such case, but this is an important case. For one, as it shows the connection between the Chinese money laundering groups and the Sinaloa drug cartel. But also because in this case, we have charged the money launderers with aiding and abetting the distribution of drugs in order to hold them fully accountable for the destruction they are causing in our country. And the bottom line message that those out there should take is that anyone out there thinking of engaging in this sort of activity and helping the cartels launder drug proceeds in this way, be advised, we will hold you fully accountable for the devastation you are causing in our country. I want to thank the folks who helped make this case possible. First, as I mentioned, the DEA is the lead enforcement agency in this case. I want to thank Administrator Milgram for coming out here to make this important announcement. Thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge the important contributions of our local partners, the Southgate Police Department, the Glendora Police Department, the Downey Police Department, El Monte Police Department, and the Fullerton Police Department. I also want to thank IRS Criminal Investigation for their work on the financial analysis in this case, and the U.S. Marshal Service for their work looking at fugitives in this case. And again, I want to thank the AUSA who's prosecuting this case, Ms. Julie Shemitz. We're grateful for this extensive collaboration. It's only through this cooperation and collaboration that we can do these important cases. And lastly, let me note, I want to acknowledge the efforts by law enforcement in Mexico and the People's Republic of China in assisting with arrest of fugitives charged in this indictment. I'll now turn over the lectern to Chief Darren Arakawa of the Southgate Police Department.
Good morning. My name is Darren Arakawa. I'm the police chief for the Southgate Police Department. And my first order of business is to recognize the phenomenal work of the professionals who have played an instrumental role in this extremely complex investigation that took years to bring to fruition. The work of the DEA special agents and the federal agent partners of ours, along with the task force officers who are investigators from Los Angeles County police agencies assigned to this very unique and highly skilled enforcement group, spent thousands of hours collecting strong and compelling evidence that was subsequently presented to the United States Attorney's Office for prosecution. To the federal agents, task force officers, professional staff, assistant United States attorneys, and everyone else involved in this investigation locally and nationally, I commend you for your efforts and thank you for your unwavering dedication to your craft. The outcome of this investigation is a strong testament to the professional relationship that exists in law enforcement at the federal, state, county, and local level. It is also worth noting that the degree of commitment that many of the Southern California police chiefs who are with me today goes far beyond simply dedicating personnel to a DEA task force. We truly believe in the mission of the DEA and the national initiatives to impact the flow of illicit and controlled substances into our communities in Los Angeles County. We have firsthand knowledge of how devastating the outcomes when drugs traverse the United States and make their way into our respective communities. We as law enforcement leaders share the responsibility to ensure that we do our part to aggressively pursue the individuals that are part of these organized crime groups. The ability to leverage all of our resources will continue beyond this investigation. Many of us have longstanding history with the DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, IRS, Criminal Investigation Division, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I, as a chief, am looking forward to being part of the successful outcomes of more investigations in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give brief remarks in Spanish before we do the Q&A. Any particular cameras for the Spanish language? Okay. Buenos días. Mi nombre es Martín Estrada. Soy el fiscal federal en Los Ángeles. Hoy anunciamos cargos criminales contra una alianza entre un cartel de droga en México y una organización china de lavadura de dinero. Esta alianza es responsable por lavar más de 50 millones de dólares. Este dinero fue generado en la venta de drogas en este país. Drogas como metanfetamina y fentanilo. Y esta alianza resulta en cargos contra 24 acusados, algunos de los cuales son asociados y miembros del cartel de droga de Sinaloa y también una organización china de lavar de dinero. A través de la alianza que alegamos hoy, estos dos grupos criminales han causado un ciclo de destrucción en este país. Ese ciclo de destrucción ocurre cuando mueven drogas a este país. Ese ciclo continúa cuando las drogas son vendidos en este país por ganancias enormes. Y ese ciclo continúa cuando, por causa de esas ganancias enormes, aún más droga son mandados a este país. Drogas como la metanfetamina y el fentanilo están devastando a nuestra gente. Estas drogas están matando a los jóvenes, incluyendo a los menores de edad. Estas drogas están dejando a la gente adictos a droga y mucha de esa gente viviendo en la calle. Es importante que tomemos acción en estos casos. Este caso manda un mensaje muy claro, que no vamos a tolerar los que lavan dinero por los carteles y también que no vamos a tolerar los que ayudan a los carteles a causar destrucción en este país. Gracias. We'll now do Q&A. Any questions that you will have?
First of all, could you explain those two photographs to us?
Yes. Yes. So what we have here is a series of photographs around the room. You will see directly to my left a photo of fentanyl seized as a result of this case. On the left beside that is a picture of two of the defendants in this case. Those are defendants Martinez Reyes and PJ Tung. They are crossing the entry point into the United States at San Isidro. And again, this is further evidence of what I talked about, this criminal partnership, this alliance between the Sinaloa cartel and the Chinese money laundering organizations. On the right, you'll see the chart, which depicts how this money laundering organization operates in general terms. And then in the back of the room, we have some photos of large amounts of money that were seized. As I mentioned, we have over $50 million in drug proceeds laundered through this investigation. We suspect many more, but through the investigation and the work of the DEA and our local partners, we seized enormous amounts of cash.
What led to the initial investigation into this?
So this investigation is one that was based on intelligence and surveillance. We have officers and relationships with officers throughout the district. We have some of the strongest relationships anywhere in the country. And we've known that this Chinese money laundering organization is out there and operating. But what's important to us is to demonstrate the direct connection to the Mexican cartels. And through this investigation, we demonstrated that direct connection to the Sinaloa cartel.
And then of the 24 people charged, can you give us a breakdown of how many were in the Sinaloa cartel? How many were part of this laundering operation? Do you have like a estimate on those?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. We can get that information to you later.
And were
How
the
far back?
24 based here in LA? How many were here in LA?
So many of them here in LA, but as I mentioned when I described the chart, much of this operation included China, included Mexico. I will note, as I said, we are grateful for the People's Republic of China conducting an arrest in this case based on what we've heard. We're also grateful for the Mexican government conducting an arrest in this case based on the information we've received. So it is truly an international collaboration. Yes.
How far back did this investigation go?
This investigation goes to at least 2019, in which we were tracing all this activity. You'll see throughout the room photos of seizures. Those were conducted throughout the course of the investigation. However, we certainly sped up the investigation, made sure we were doing everything possible when we saw the amounts of drugs that were coming in.
Can you describe any government actions by Mexico or China to stop the flow of fentanyl into the US and what difference that is making?
So I can't get into particulars here in terms of other operations. I'll let the administrator talk about that more generally. But I will say in this case, as I mentioned, we're grateful based on information we received for one arrest in the People's Republic of China and one arrest in Mexico. I don't know if you have more to add on that.
I would just echo what the U.S. Attorney has said. I personally traveled to Beijing as part of the National Security Council delegation earlier this year. We have had repeated engagements with the Ministry of Public Security in China. We have repeated engagements also with Mexican law enforcement. And I've said many times and think it's vitally important that we will do anything we can to stop Americans from dying and to stop the harm that we are seeing caused by these two cartels that are based in Mexico. And we will work shoulder to shoulder with any law enforcement agency that will work with us.
How knowledgeable were the Chinese nationals about the source of the dollars they were purchasing? Like, are any assets like real estate subject to forfeiture?
So we have charged the money launderers in this case with aiding and abetting drug trafficking. So through their actions, aiding and abetting the actual distribution of drugs. You can see just from the photos how closely allied these two groups were. So we believe certainly that when you're picking up bags of cash from individuals connected to the Sinaloa cartel, you're on notice.
But like, as far as the people in China who are trying to move their money to the US, like how knowledgeable were they about the source of the
Certainly.
funds?
So you're talking about the wealthy Chinese
Right.
nationals who are want to move money to the United States. We have no direct evidence showing knowledge that this came from drug proceeds. I will note, however, that when you're operating through an illegal money transfer system and you're obtaining large bulk cash from money laundering operatives, one should be suspicious of where that money's coming from.
And are all in custody? I know you got one in China, one in Mexico. Are the others in custody right now?
Including those, we have at least 22 arrested or in custody.
Retail crime is often organized crime. Do you believe that there is a deterrent value in prosecuting retail crime as a felony?
So what we're talking about here is a criminal partnership between the Sinaloa drug cartel and a Chinese money laundering organization. That's the extent of what we're talking about. So I'm not going to go off topic. Any other questions? Yes.
Now that you've uncovered this complex operation, what preventative measures are you doing from taking root again?
Well, we take preventative measures all the time in law enforcement and in the department. We do a lot of educational outreach. You'll see that through our community engagement to let people know about the dangers here. The DEA has a national program in that regard through education. But this investigation continues. And as I said, anyone who's laundering money on behalf of the cartels is on notice that we'll use all the tools available to us to investigate you and prosecute you. Anyone else?
How did it help as far as the cash flow goes? I know you said that they collect like a 2% fee or up to a 2% fee. Are you saying that 2% of money created a large amount of cash for them to carry out the other part of their business, the money exchange? Or was it that they just had so much holding cash from this whole operation?
So let me sort of go back over it just to make sure it's clear. Traditional money laundering has always had a commission paid or sort of a percentage of the total amount that has to be paid. If you think about the more traditional money laundering that's always taken place, it ranges between about 5 to 10% is paid by the people who want the money laundered. What's unique, and this is part of why we believe that Chinese money laundering organizations are now operating across the United States and providing this type of money laundering service for the cartels, is that the percentage that gets paid in the US is closer to 1 or 2%. So the affiliates and members of the Sinaloa cartel are paying much less to get their money laundered than they were before. What's important to understand is that the individuals in China, the wealthy Chinese who are trying to get money out of China, they're also paying a percentage commission. So the way that the money launderers are sort of making money is the individuals in China are paying a percentage, 2-4%, to get their money out of China. And the drug cartels in the US are paying a much lower percentage now, 1-3%, in order to get that money.
Okay, and then just real quick, when the goods were bought in China, this is with the Mexican drug cartel money. they were sold in China or sent to Mexico, sold in Mexico and cashed out?
So the way the organization operated is that the goods are sent from China to Mexico and they are sold, and then the proceeds from the sales there go to the drug cartels.
Okay.
So one last question, please.
¿Cómo colaboró el gobierno mexicano en este proceso, en la captura de estos?
Nosotros siempre queremos colaborar con el gobierno mexicano y ellos son muy importantes en este esfuerzo que hacemos contra la droga en este país, incluyendo fentanilo y metanfetamina. Sabemos que ellos han arrestado uno de los acusados en México y eso es importante para nosotros, que ellos no solo cooperan con ese arresto, pero siguen cooperando con nosotros para que podamos tener la mayor impacto posible.
¿Cuántos fueron arrestados?
Uno arrestado en México y uno arrestado en la China.
¿Y los otros 22?
Aquí en los Estados Unidos. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.